Hi, my name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel, and today I'm going to look back at the history of the last 3 years, and over that time we've turned around 3 allotment plots. So I just want to tell the story basically of what we did and how we did it, and there'll be links in the description to this video to other videos with all the details of everything we built and how we built it, reviews of the polytunnel and all of that sort of thing. So do take a look at that description. So I retired 4 years ago and I was really looking around for a hobby that would fill about 16 hours a week. And I started to think, yeah, gardening was definitely going to be a big part of that. And I started to garden, started to grow veg in my back garden. And I can turn the back garden into a bit of a scruffy allotment, basically. It looked absolutely horrible, and so pretty soon after the first season really, I realised that the back garden wasn't the best place to do it, and so I started looking around for an allotment. And 3 years ago I got an allotment, and it was really just a patch of ground with 3 trees, a really dilapidated shed, and lots of weeds. There was no evidence of compost bins or anything like that, so the ground obviously hadn't been composted very heavily, and it was just really horrible sandy soil basically. The water just ran off the top of it and didn't even soak into it very well. But as soon as it did soak in, it was gone and it was dry the next day. It was full of weeds, and I didn't realise when I got it that it was actually full of bindweed and mare's tail, and of course I thought, well, I cleared it and it was all looking lovely, and then just bindweed just sprang up through all the fruit bushes, through all the raised beds and everything. Anyway, that's another story. So I'd already read enough gardening books to know that weeds were going to be the biggest challenge. That was even before the bindweed and the mare's tail. And I'd had a lot of health problems over the previous 15 years. So I knew I wanted to get something that was going to be really easy to manage for me, easy to move around and all that sort of thing. So what I did was I laid it out in a nice grid pattern. I put in raised beds running roughly east to west, and made hoop tunnels and netted frames for those. They were all exactly the same size, so all of the covers were interchangeable. Put in landscape fabric down on the paths and then covered those paths with wood chips. And I was really pleased with the progress. Then I had a sort of season of doing battle with the weeds, but it wasn't too bad. Now the way I made the beds up was basically sorry about the cough. I levelled the plot, and I used that gave me enough spare soil to sort of half fill the raised beds, and then the other half was made up of a mix of spent mushroom compost and well rotted horse manure, and that proved to be a really lovely combination. It was very loose, very well draining, but absolutely full of organic matter. And since then I've added about 1 inch to 2 inches sometimes of additional compost on top of those beds, and so they're in beautiful condition now. I'm really happy with them. So in about August time I realised that I really wanted to grow over winter, and so I built some coal frames and put just simple polythene over the top of them, a simple hinged design, and I've got some nice videos on how I made those, and they complemented the hoop tunnels really nicely. And then in subsequent years I've actually added effectively coal frame tops to all of my raised beds, and the beauty of that design is that come mid-spring I can just take the lids off, store them around the back of the polytunnel, and they're just ordinary raised beds. just with a little bit of extra shelter, because the north side of them is raised a little bit higher, and the predominant wind direction here is from the northwest. So they, you know, everything just gets that extra bit of warmth and shelter, so they work really nicely. And obviously, you know, with the tops off, they don't need any watering, or not anywhere near as much watering. But come late early autumn, I can just pop the tops back on again, and then they protect everything all the way through winter. So they've really been a great benefit to the site. So we started, Debbie and I, my wife, really itching to get some more growing space, and so I was thrilled when in March of the following year, so that's 2 years ago, Debbie got a plot. And but it was really convenient because it's only a few plots down the green drive from mine, but oh, what a plot it proved to be. I'd torn a muscle in my stomach, and so I really couldn't help Debbie very much, and so she took on the lion's share of you know, transforming her plot. And you know, so in their wisdom, the people who'd had the plot previous to her, or the people previous to them, we're not exactly sure which, decided to put down loads of landscape fabric against the weeds, and loads of carpet. And you know, about 3 plot generations back from that, somebody decided to store a boat on the plot, and in order to create a hard standing, they'd put down a ton or more of bricks and broken roof tiles and all of that sort of thing. So the plot was basically a combination of really bad weeds, mare's tail, couch grass, bindweed, carpet through which weeds had grown, landscape fabric through which weeds had grown, and hardcore. So that was pretty much what we inherited. And when we first looked at it, it just looked like couch grass, and we thought, oh well, that's no problem, we can just dig all that out and put a thick mulch down, and put landscape fabric on top of that, etc. So we'd got a kind of idea of what we were going to do, but of course as soon as we started to try and dig, all we hit was carpet or landscape fabric or hardcore. So it was an absolute nightmare. So Debbie spent about she was working then, she spent about 3 months every weekend basically just digging and digging and digging and hacking and whatever. Fortunately, by about that 3-month time, my stomach tear had healed pretty well, and I got to work on the plot as well. And I was ending up sawing through with a wood saw through the landscape fabric and through the carpet, and then ripping it out in strips and then digging it out and whatever. Anyway, eventually we got the plot fairly clean, but obviously we knew it was still full of couch grass roots, mare's tail roots, etc, etc. So what we did was we put about 2 inches of horse bedding, so that's basically wood chips, down to feed the soil over the long term, and then we put landscape fabric over that to stop all those weeds, which we just push straight through that wood chip, and then we put another 2 inches of wood chip on top of that, and again that would be more long-term feeding of the soil, but also a nice sort of decorative effect. Unfortunately, we found a supplier of wood chips, so that was all free. And then we put raised beds, and basically those raised beds, actually we didn't have any spare soil, so those were just a mixture of well-rotted horse manure and spent mushroom compost, and they were 6 inches deep, and so that stopped a lot of the weeds as well. And then around all the fruit bushes we just put landscape fabric, and around the orchard area and all that sort of thing. So we eventually got Debbie's plot in pretty good shape. And then we got even better news that my daughter, who was also on the waiting list, she got a plot. And we were really lucky that her plot, although it was, you know, really covered in weeds, most of those were annuals. And so I set to work, while Debbie worked on hers, I set to work on that one with Jennie and John, and we pretty quickly got that plot cleared. And it was really picturesque. It's surrounded by hedges, and it's got lovely grass. We had lovely grass paths. We put in a lawn, and Debbie built a patio area, and it was really nice. We laid down about 3 inches of spent mushroom compost across the whole of the plot. And at that time we didn't know that spent mushroom compost wasn't perfect for potatoes, but in the end it actually worked okay. Just a little tiny bit of scab on some of them, but it wasn't too bad. And then summer happened and we realised that these grass paths were just incredibly annoying. They were too narrow for a mower, they were too narrow for a wheelbarrow, and so we just so it was just really inconvenient, and we were strimming them all the time. Weeds were just encroaching, grass weeds were encroaching from the path into the beds all the time. The beds were basically level with the grass paths as well, so it was really difficult to lay down compost mulches on top of the beds without all that compost just falling into the paths, and the weeds just growing from the paths into the beds. So we decided come sort of November time that we would really put a lot of effort into reducing the workload on Jennie's plot. So we put in sides, wooden sides, so effectively raised beds, but huge raised beds, and that allowed us to put a really nice thick compost mulch on, and that's that dramatically reduced the amount of weeding that we had to do on the plot. And we put we basically did the same as we did on Jennie's plot. So we put horse bedding down on top of the grass paths, just straight on top of the grass, about 2 inches of that, and then we put landscape fabric, double thickness, on top of that. And then in the orchard area we basically did the same thing, because what we found, the orchard area was covered with ground elder. And so because it was the orchard area, we didn't want to spray it with a weed killer, so we just did this same thing: thick mulch, landscape fabric, thick mulch of wood chip on top of the landscape fabric, and that did conquer the ground elder. We got a little tiny bit growing somewhere down the edges. We just put a little bead of weed killer down that, but that's miles away from any of the edibles. And yeah, so that's worked really well, and so it's massively reduced the workload on Jennie's plot. Jennie doesn't have a lot of time to look after it, and we definitely don't have a lot of time. So we got the workload down on that plot to about 2 hours a week, which on average, and that's between the 3 of us. So it's really an extremely low maintenance plot. And we also just planted all the low maintenance stuff in there, so the potatoes and the onions and the garlic and the brassicas and things like that. So that proved great. It just provided a huge amount of extra growing space for us all, and virtually no extra work. So on my plot I had these 3 trees, and when I first got the plot I loved these trees. I thought, I'd grown up with an orchard in my back garden, and I thought, fantastic, 3 apple trees. I didn't know what they were. It turned out that there was an eating apple tree, and that was just vile. They were the worst eating apples I've ever had. They were really, really mealy and tasteless, and full of grubs. But that was a relatively small tree, so we managed to dig that one out and cut that one down, no problem. And then we had 2 really big cooking apple trees, and 4 out of 5 of those apples had grubs on them. The good apples that didn't have so many grubs were right at the top of the tree, and there was no way to get to it. You couldn't climb the blooming thing. Even with the longest kind of extension cutting poles and things like that, you couldn't get to them. So all those apples just fell as windfalls, just hundreds and hundreds of windfalls. And every day when I came down all the way through late summer and autumn, I would just be picking up blooming apples, chopping them up, sticking them in the compost bin. It was just a real pain, and we never eaten them because they were full of grubs and windfalls, bruised and everything. So we were getting about maybe 50 apples or something, useful apples, off these trees, and so I decided I'd definitely get these trees cut down. Unfortunately, a friend of ours came and did that for us, and just left us with these huge stumps. And as soon as I looked at this plot without the apple trees, I thought, well, that's just where I need to put a polytunnel. And I was so excited that suddenly out of nowhere, this area of land that had just been a real pain for me, you know, where nothing grew, and all it was kind of the misery of clearing up dropped apples, suddenly became this huge open sunny area that was perfect for polytunnel. So I managed to talk a tree surgeon into coming and grinding the tree stumps out for me, and we did that actually the week of the beast from the east. And I was just, when I had those stumps out, I was so excited. So we got it all cleared. We had then we moved the path and levelled it up, because you know, the path was all over the place previously, and then the polytunnel just slotted in perfectly, 20 foot by 10 foot, and it just, you know, it's been absolutely fantastic. It's transformed my time on the plot all the way through the season. I mean, not only do we grow loads of stuff in here, obviously, I mean, that's the biggest benefit, of course, but also it's just this fabulous place for harvesting. It's a great place for sheltering and having your lunch. It's a great place for retreating from the rain and snow and hail and whatever in winter. And it's, you know, a great place for starting all your seedlings and all that sort of thing. It's just proved fabulous. And then early this year, we kind of decided that we were going to put a massive investment into the plots in terms of loads more berries, loads more apple trees and plum trees and pear trees, cherry trees. So we put all those loads of extra trees in, and made two big new raised beds on Jennie's plot, which we put the strawberries in, and then down the centres we put garlic as well. So we got, you know, loads more garlic and loads more berries. So we're really excited. So now that kind of brings us to you know, present day, and you know, it's kind of worth just now looking back a little bit at you know, not just that infrastructure work, but you know, what it's been like on the allotment during that time. And generally I can just sum it up as transformative. It's a wonderful place to spend your time. The community here is lovely. The committee's, you know, really hard working. The site, because we've got such a hard working committee, the site is immaculate and wins loads of awards. So it's just a beautiful place to come. It's transformed my health. It's saved us an absolute fortune. We harvested, I think, £3,000 in the first year, £5,000 in the second year, and £7,500 in the third year. And we're on target to harvest £10,000 worth of veg this year. And we eat about half of that veg, and we give the rest away to our friends and family. And so that's been great as well. And it's just, you know, it's just been fabulous. So looking forward. So on my plot, I just keep on pushing the boundaries of what I can grow. So I try and grow more stuff, more varieties, you know, extend the seasons. We're already self-sufficient in veg, so we're trying to become much more self-sufficient in fruit. We're storing much more fruit, we're dehydrating fruit, we're gifting a lot more fruit to our friends and family, so you know, we're helping them out. And in general we're growing more varieties, so we're growing 250 varieties of fruit and veg this year, and that just provides us with this incredibly rich, wonderful diet. And you know, we barter for our eggs, and so you know, that's another wonderful part of our diet. And you know, so that's just generally what I'm doing. I'm just kind of pushing the boundaries and experimenting more and more. We've done a huge investment in water on all three of the plots. So we've got gutters on the polytunnels, and we've got loads of water storage on all the plots. All the buildings on all three plots have all got gutters now. So we've done masses of work on the water situation, which is really nice as well. And yeah, so I think that's mostly what I'm doing. I will eventually replace the ramshackle shed. It's full of woodworm and it's rotting, completely rotten. And it's held up by a new structure basically that I've kind of built inside it to support it. But it obviously won't last more than a few years. So I will eventually build myself a nice shed. On Debbie's plot, we're gradually transitioning that to more perennials. So loads of herbs, both herbs for flavouring food and herbs for making teas. Just huge number, all sorts of different types of berries and currants, lots of trees, plum trees, pear trees, cherry trees, apple trees, just kiwis, all sorts of stuff. And just anything perennial that we find, perennial kales and things like that, we're adding those all to Debbie's plot. And that kind of reduces the workload a little bit for her, but it also makes it just more of a garden. She just wants a beautiful kitchen garden, and so it's really shaping up really nicely from that perspective. And on Jennie's plot, it's basically just learning how to keep the beds full of veg all year round. And so that's my challenge. Last year I did really badly. Maybe half of the plot in winter was just bare ground or landscape fabric, and this year it's about probably 2/3 of it are planted, but a third of it still just bare ground. And I've determined that the whole plot is going to be growing useful produce all the way through the year. And so that's my challenge. My plot is already like that, and Debbie's plot, a lot of it's like that because it's perennials. So we're really keen on making sure that every square inch is growing something all of the time. And that does mean that we do a lot of work on composting. When I started off on my plot, the first thing I did was build a compost bin, and then a second compost bin, and then a third compost bin, and then a fourth compost bin, and then we added Dalek bins, and we keep on adding Dalek bins to the other plots. So composting is a huge thing for us, and we like to add rock dust to the compost and seaweed off the beach to the compost, and we also add supplemental seaweed which we buy onto the beds, because all of our food comes from the allotments. We're really conscious that we want the maximum amount of minerals in that soil, so that we don't have any deficiencies in our diet. So I think that is pretty much it. It's been wonderful 3 years, and we have harvested a heck of a lot. I'll just pop up a few pictures of some of our harvests. These are, we harvest twice a day. We harvest twice a week through most of the year, and so these are typical daily harvests. I hope you enjoyed that, and do look in the description if you want more info on any of the things I talked about, and I'll see you soon.